Hey, welcome to the Relentless Positivity Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Martin. Got a guest today that, hey, are you a parent? Do you need a little help? Do you need a little assistance? Maybe some resources? That's our guy today. So he did the same thing. Come when he started having his girls, he's the one kind of started writing it down, started a blog, and then eventually grew to a massive population of resources and help for dads out there. For Chris, thanks for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate the time.
It is my pleasure. Love being able to talk about fatherhood. Love being able to just kind of share some of the things that I've learned along the way. Not that I'm an expert in any sense, but love to be able to help where I can.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know you love to go out and serve and help dads all across the world. So it's really important. I think they're more important than ever right now. So can you kind of share the story behind Dads of Divas? How you started your blog?
Sure thing. Let me talk about dads. I'll talk about Dad of Divas and then how that kind of led to fathering together as well, because it was kind of a circuitous path. But so I have two daughters. Now they are 19 and a half and 16. So looking back, I had always been a storyteller, always enjoyed writing. And when we were expecting our second child, I had been seeing a ton of women that were just writing about their own experiences as mothers, but not a lot of fathers that were writing. And this was back in 2007. And I talked to a few mom bloggers that I knew, learned a little bit from them, kind of reached out to a few guys and blog that did have blogs that were doing some things and learned from them and decided that I would start my own blog to be able to just again start to talk about my journey as a dad. And at that point, there weren't, as I said, a lot of dads that were in the space. And the dads that were there were they were pretty purist in the sense that they were there not to make money. They were there to just write about being a dad and to chronicle it, to be able to help other dads in different ways. Still not a lot of dads out there. But I jumped in and I have to give credit where credit is due. My wife came up with the name. Dad of Divas was the she she and I both talked about names and she said, "Well, you're going to be a father of two daughters, so why don't you call it Dad of Divas?" And I'm like, "Okay, that sounds pretty good. So why don't we go with that?" And the rest is history in that regard. So throughout the years, for the first, I'm going to say year, 2 years, it was mostly just, it was me sharing my own journey, pictures, experiences, and being able to share in that regard. Then kind of uh, dip my toe a little bit into what it would be like to try reviewing some products. I tried reviewing some blogs because I like to read to my daughters. So I was able to start doing that. And then I think the first product I ever tried out for a company were Energizer lithium batteries. I had reached out to Energizer and said, "Hey, there are so many things that we have to put batteries in. I love your lithium batteries." And they sent me a free coupon. So I wrote about it. So that was, I started doing that, and not that the blog became a review blog or anything like that, but had some opportunities along the way to be able to share my own experiences with products, with taking my kids to different places and shared those journeys as well. So Dad of Divas, it became a side business in some aspects. Never, it was never something that made me allowed me to quit my job in any sense, but it was something that helped me to be able to offset the costs of some things. And as I was doing that, I also was telling the stories of other dads. And I had a series on Dad of Divas called Dads in the Limelight, where over about 5 or 6 years, I interviewed about 800 dads about their journeys as fathers, dads of daughters, dads of sons. And through that, learned a lot that I put into my own perspective, my own fatherhood journey, but also shared that out with the masses. As I continued on, I started to realize that we weren't getting as much engagement with the content that I was putting out there. started using social media more, trying to engage people in different ways, and found that still wasn't getting the engagement that I wanted. I went to a fatherhood conference that was called the Dad 2.0 conference. That was a conference that went on for a number of years that brought together fathers, fatherhood influencers. And at that conference, Facebook was there. And this was back in, I'm going to say 2017 ish, 2017, 2018. And they were there and they were talking about the power of community and the power of groups. And at that conference, I, for the heck of it, started a Facebook group called Dads with Daughters. And the reason for that was that I had previously, and a few, like a couple of years prior to that, had started podcasting. I had a podcast called The Dad Spotlight, where we talked about fatherhood, help dads. And again, trying to engage dads in many different ways. But I felt like I wanted to be able to connect with other dads of daughters, specifically because I had two daughters. So I started this group organically, it grew, and we got very lucky. And Facebook actually made a commercial about the group.
Oh,
And this was during the period of time when they were doing these commercials called More Together. You may remember some
yeah, I remember 'em.
commercials.
Yeah.
Yep, the commercials that were talking about Facebook groups. And they were saying all of us are more together if we come together as groups. And they picked our group. So Brian Anderson and I were leading the group at the time. And at the time that the commercial went live, it was a national commercial. It went live and we went from 10,000 members to, by the end of the campaign in November, we were probably at about 90,000 members.
Wow.
And it kept growing from there. And now it's at about 128,000 members worldwide.
Okay.
And during that period, Brian and I decided that we were going to start a new organization called Fathering Together. And we did that because we said, both of us are educators, both of us want more for engaging fathers in this conversation about how they can be the best dads that they can be, how they can support not only their daughters, their sons, support their spouses, and be actively engaged in their families. So we started Fathering Together in 2019, turned it into a 501c3 in 2020, and it's been that ever since. So it's been a continual growth process. And I said I did podcasting. I have continued to do podcasting. I have a podcast called Dads with Daughters, and that is a podcast of Fathering Together. And again, that's got 220 odd episodes all about being a dad to a daughter. And it's just about helping dads. So the journey that I've been on started as one that was to help myself, really, but it really became more of a passion to help other dads along the way and be able to engage fathers in this journey, to engage them in being willing to talk to other men, to be vulnerable in their own space, and to be willing to understand that they don't have to do this alone.
I think that's the most important thing right there, because when you're a dad and you're just trying to figure out there's not the manual like everything else with your car or computer or anything like that. You got this new baby, like now what? you know so man, just having that, I mean, a small city basically, or not a decent sized city that you can bounce ideas off and get resources from, man, that's so valuable for people that they're not alone, that they got this group of guys they can reach out to. They're doing the same thing, you got the same goals in mind. So that's been amazing. So you say you're not an expert, but man, just having contact with all those people, all those podcasts and all these resources, all these things you've been in contact with, you've learned a thing or two along the way. So I want to kind of pick your brain on a few things. So what do you see as kind of the most significant challenges for fathers today, particularly for fathers of daughters?
One of the things that I've noticed lately is that there is a growing mental health crisis in many men. Some of that goes down to the fact that, again, there's still this sense that men have to know what they're doing, that they have to go alone, that they have to be willing to man up and just push through. And the truth is you don't. The truth is that all of us as people, all of us as men, as fathers, we all struggle in our own ways. And we have to be willing to talk to other dads about these challenges, the things that we're struggling with, and know that there are other people around us, whether it's your next door neighbor, your best friend, whether it's you get together with a group of men that are have similar age kids and you get together once a month and you're willing to not only talk about, let's say, sports, but you're willing to talk about, okay, what are you dealing with? What are what are you struggling with? And be there for each other. Sometimes you see that in religious senses, small groups, things like that. And I'm not saying that it has to be a small groups type of setting and based on a religion or anything like that. I'm saying there are many men in your community that would be more than willing to go out, just hang out and be able to talk about lots of things. Now, sometimes ripping that band-aid off and being willing to be the first one to say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. I'm really, this is something that I don't know how to deal with. How did you deal with it? How are you dealing with it? And and build that tribe for yourself in many different ways. Those things are really important. And you have to be willing to put yourself out there in that regard. And it can be scary, but the lack of willingness to put yourself out there, the lack of willingness to talk about these things, and all of those, I think, and I feel lead to this mental health crisis that we're starting to see in many men because of the fact that there is this loneliness that also pervades being a man in society. And I've come to find, I mean, yeah, I've got some friends, but as you get older, you hold on to the friends that you may have had for a while, but making new friends isn't always easy. And you have to push yourself out there to be willing or able to do it. And sometimes you make friends through what your kids do. Your kids are in sports, you connect with other dads that way, and maybe you make a connection. Sometimes it's through other activities or through a church or some other type of activity that you're involved in. That's all great. Sometimes you might need to just put something out there and say, hey, pulling together a group of fathers. Any dads that want to get together, we're going to meet up at this restaurant and just kind of hang out. Come on out. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about fatherhood. Let's talk about just kind of let's get to know each other. But I think those are some things that I've seen because what I continuously hear from fathers of daughters is, especially at the beginning, there's some fear that goes along with raising daughters, especially if you've never had much experience with being around girls growing up. I was an only child, so I had no basis for what I was getting myself into outside of other dads that I connected with. That was one of the reasons that I was interviewing dads, was to get some of those other perspectives and to understand those other perspectives and take and pick and choose the things that worked for me. And you can do that too. And I think that those are some things that I've been seeing more lately.
Yeah, those are some great points. I mean, I've noticed the same that you get, a little bit older, it's hard to get new male friends as you get older. It's just, but you made some great points about how you can connect. And I think that most of us aren't willing to put ourselves out there and I don't know, face that rejection of maybe he won't want to talk to me about this or they won't want to come out. I invite people out and I'm just sitting at the restaurant by myself. So I think it's like anything else. You kind of got to choose your hard. I mean, do you want to struggle by yourself that hard or you want to do the hard of overcoming, hey, just reaching out and being vulnerable and just trying something new? It's tough as you get older. None of us like change for the most part, right? And that's one of those things you don't want. So um, just on a personal level, how did you keep that father-daughter bond going as they get older? I'll go through all those different changes as they got older. How did you go through that?
I think one of the things that I always tried to do and that I encourage all dads to do is to stay present and to stay engaged because There are going to be times when your kids push back, when they push you away, when you feel like you're putting a lot of effort in and you're not getting much back. And it can make you feel like a failure at times. But you got to keep showing up, you got to keep being there. And even if that means, they play soccer and you're at every game and you're taking pictures of all the players and you're sharing those pictures out. You're getting involved with the things that they're interested in. And it may be something that you have no interest in.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Get to know, get to understand it, and be willing to take a active interest in what they're interested in. May not mean that you're going to love playing Barbie, but you can still play Barbie. You can get on the floor when your kid's really young and play the things that they love to play. If they're a gamer and you have no clue how to even play, and you know that every time you pick up that controller that you're going to kill yourself in the game, okay. So you're going to make a fool of yourself. That's okay. You might get a little frustrated. And as you go through that, you just have to be honest with your kid and say, you know what, I'm really frustrated. And I'm not taking that out on you, but I wish I was better at this. And can you teach me? Can you
Yeah.
teach me how can I get better at this? And let them help you along the way too. But I think the other thing to think about that I try to do, and I think that really helps in building a strong relationship, is one, you have to listen and hear what your daughters are telling you. You have to do that with if you have a spousal relationship, you got to do the same thing, because so many men are so willing to just passively listen and jump in to try to answer a question or jump in to try to solve a problem. And there are times when your spouse, if you have a spouse, your daughters don't want that. They just want to talk and they want you to hear what they're saying. They don't need you to solve anything. And, one of the conversations that I had in the past it was a great guest that was on the Dad Spotlight podcast, which no longer exists, but she was on, and one of the things she said to me was that one of the things that dads can do, especially if you have daughters, but you can say it with sons too, but more so with daughters, is as you're starting to have this conversation, you can say to your daughter, is this a listening conversation or a solving conversation? And you let them decide. Because if they've made the choice and they say, this is a solving conversation, I need your help with this. That gives you the okay to come in and come up with solutions. Whereas if they say, this is a listening conversation, you almost have to turn off that solving brain and just be there to listen, because if you start to solve, they're going to shut down. So those are a couple of things that come to mind when I think about that. But just know that you're going to have to keep showing up. You're going to have to keep just being there and being patient, and being willing to be your daughter's biggest advocate. And some of that does go into, you know, society and how society portrays women, and sometimes you have to build up their spirit and continue to build up their spirit in that regard too.
Wow. Yeah, those are great tips, man. Hey, if your kid likes it, you better love it, right? And even if it's not your favorite thing, I've sat through a lot of Minecraft conversations that I wish I would have had back in my life, man. But now you look back and it's like, hey, that was a great time. If he wants to talk about it, I want to listen. You want to tell me about it, even if it bores me to death. And I see no value in this, but I see value in my son. So, man, if they like it, I love it. So, from a daughter's perspective, what does that mean for their development when they know they got that strong, supportive dad who's going to be there for them no matter what?
Can you say that question again? You broke up. Sorry.
I was just saying, what does it mean for your daughter's development growing up when they know they have that strong, supportive dad that's going to be there listening and do whatever they want them, that's always there for them?
I think that having that type of role model in their life helps them as they get older. It gives them that affirmation in their own self-worth, and then also encourages them to uh, potentially look for a partner in their own life that is going to give back to them that same type of affirmation. And I think that's important. I think that's important. I'm not saying that to say that I mean, I've heard some men say, I want to be the man that they look at other men and they say in their life. And I'm not saying that.
Yep.
I'm saying they're going to have relationships. And I want them to go into those relationships looking for people that affirm them in a way that I've affirmed my own daughters. And whether that's male female relationships, female female relationships, friendships, whatever it may be. I've had many conversations with my daughters over the years about friendships, toxic friendships. What does it mean to be a friend? What should they be looking for in friendships, relationships, to be able to, again, to affirm them in the end? Because no matter what, all of us want to be affirmed. We want to be affirmed in who we are. We want to be affirmed in what we do. And in by us as parents doing that affirmation, showing them that we accept them no matter how they show up during a day, that helps them in that. There are days that's harder than others.
Yep.
And there are going to be days where you're like, how do I affirm this? This is not what I want to affirm. But you have to keep understanding that your child may not be the angel you always want them to be every moment of every day. And they may be acting out in a way at home that they may never act out in public because they are comfortable at home showing their entire self. And that's not always an easy thing to accept because sometimes you can get the brunt of things.
Yep. I think if you're a
And
parent, you've seen that. If you're a parent, you've probably been through that.
definitely. So I guess I go back to that, just that affirmation that you're going to have to affirm them in many different ways. And for daughters, there's affirmation not only in their self-worth, there's body image aspects. I mean, you see that in many different ways. Your daughter will come at some point in your life and ask, do I look pretty? And the answer is yes, you look beautiful. And, you know, they want affirmation. And you are there to be that support for them.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. That's always the answer. Whatever, whenever they ask, they're pretty. Yes, yes, you absolutely are. That's a great answer. I think daughters really, really need to hear that a lot of the times. Because I was gonna ask you about if you had dealt with body image growing up, because I know it's a big thing across the board for a lot of kids, male and female, but particularly for daughters out there.
You definitely do. I mean, I think that every child has concerns about it. I have both my daughters have been very athletic. One of my daughters is now in college. She has come back and has said, I think I've gained a ton of weight. And I said, no, you haven't. I said, and I'm not lying to her. I said, you've been busting your butt. You've been working out. You've been running. You're running like every day. And yeah, you got to watch what you eat. And she was, but I said, you're gaining muscle is what's happening. And it's going to look different, feel different on your body. But just understand that that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. And there are times though you have to just listen, and because me saying even that could turn off the conversation.
Sure.
So you have to be aware of what your daughter is asking of you, and every situation's a little bit different. But yeah, definitely body image impacts lots of people. Society still has a big problem with that. You look at any advert or a lot of advertisement. I'm not going to say any advertisement because I think that media has started to get better showing different body types and being able to allow for people to see not just the models out there, but at the same time, there are still a lot of models out there that look very similar and there are still many businesses that use that type of image to sell a product. And you have to, especially with daughters, but also sons too, you have to help them to understand, especially from a young age, that what they see in front of them in the movies, what they see in front of them on television, what they see in front of them in an advertisement may not be reality. And you and I have both seen it. There's lots of airbrushing
Oh,
that
sure.
is happening. And you can easily take an image that's taken and completely transform the person into something that the person looks nothing like, even though it is a picture of that person. So you have to really have those meaningful conversations with your daughter, with your son, for them to understand that and to be able to get to a point where they can be happy in the body that they're in. And that can take time, that can take effort, and it's not going to be a one time conversation.
Yeah, I think that just goes back to what you're talking about earlier. Just keep affirming them, keep the conversations open, keep talking, stay in touch because it's not the end. That's not that one off conversation. So, kind of along the line, did you guys deal with the bullying issue growing up?
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple of times where that was the case. We had some situations where one of my daughters was on social media and there were kids that were saying very mean things and bullying her in different ways. And she was engaging back and forth. And we had to very quickly try to shut that down and try to, help her to better understand. You're feeding the beast,
Mm,
and the more that you engage the beast, the person that is that bully, the more that they are feeding off of it, the more that they gain from it, and the more that they will continue to bully you in the end. So in that end, I think we had some really good conversations, and that helped her to better understand where that limit needs to be. Not that she always maintained that limit, but that there were definite times where that limit existed, and that she felt like she could just step away. And I know of other people that they've had to get their kid off of social media, and I think you have to have some really strong conversations when your kids are young about, do you allow them to be on social media? And if so, what kind of monitoring do you do? Or what kind of limits do you do? Do you use an app like a Bark or some other type of app that is out there that lets you be able to safeguard your kid? If you're going to do that, you need to start it young and have the conversations along the way. Because if you're trying to jump in when your kids are teenagers and they're already on social media and then saying, hey, by the way, we're adding this monitoring app to your phone, that's going to go over like a sack of rocks. So you just have to keep that in mind. So doing things at an early point, there's going to be times where your kid is going to be being pushed to be on social media, and as a family, you have to make that decision for yourself of if and when that is going to happen. And then when you do that, you need to be able to have a plan for how do you introduce your child to that, and how do you keep them safe in using that type of place as well.
yeah, it's very prevalent. I mean, when you and I were growing up at 3 o'clock, whenever school's over, that was when the bullying was over. Now it's 24/7, and it's right there in their pocket. And we used the Bark app when my son was younger, and we just told him, hey, uh, part of having this phone is we can look at your phone anytime we want. I mean, that's just we're going to protect you, protect the other kids that you may be bullying. We don't know, so just that's kind of part of it. You make that decision as a parent, though, but you really need to know what's going on, whether it's an app or staying in their lives, because there's it's very very dangerous out there. Not even besides the bullying, just predators and things out there. So, uh, hey, don't be the cool parent. Be the parent. Don't try to be their friend. So, get all soapbox moment for that. But anyway, so you've been influenced by all these dads over the years. How has it affected your own parenting style or anything you've done over the years? Anything that stands out over the years?
I think that there's definitely things that I've incorporated from hearing the stories of other dads. There's things that I hear younger dads doing that I'm like, oh, I wish I would have done that when my kids were younger. And indefinitely there's some things where I talk to older dads and I hear what they did as their child was transitioning into college and beyond, and how the relationship changes and how you have to make those changes. And I'm still learning
Hmm.
in those type of conversations and those type and learning from those type of relationships. So I think starting the podcast that I've done, the communities that I've done, the blog have all been something that have allowed me to be able to not only help others, but learn myself. And so it's a little self-serving in the work that I have done, but it's also from a servant heart to be able to help others in ways that I wish that I had had when I was first a dad and as a young dad and trying to transition through that period of raising my girls.
Oh, that's great. If you learn something, you should pass it on, right? You shouldn't just keep that to yourself. Like, you do an awesome job of that. So, if there is a new dad listening to this podcast right now, he's got this brand new daughter. What's the advice you give the brand new dad to the daughter?
The biggest piece of advice that I would always tell a brand new father or someone that's going to have a child very soon is always be engaged, even from those early ages, the even when they're babies, get on the floor, play with them, lay with them, be there, take the time. When your child is born, if you have the ability to take a paternity leave, take it. If you have time, be willing to take that time. Don't feel like you have to, you know, leave your spouse alone or your significant other alone because you have to get back to work to provide. If your work provides you with a benefit, take advantage of the benefit or ask your work, is there a benefit? Because you know that women get a benefit. Many times companies either have not thought of or have not provided the paternity leave in the past. More and more companies are starting to, especially if they're larger, but asking, I mean, the worst they can say is no.
Right.
We don't offer that, but you might have vacation time that you can take. I'll tell you, those first few weeks, the first month, there's so much happening and there's so much growth that is happening, so much bonding that is happening. And the your significant other is going through a lot. And the more that you can be there to be able to be there for her, to be actively engaged in helping is going to bring home huge dividends in the end.
Yeah, that's it. A friend of mine told me he'd had a couple kids before me, and he told me, "Hey, it's the best of times and it's the worst of times. You're exhausted. There's a lot going on, but man, you don't want to miss these days at all. You be active, be involved, man. It's so worth it. You may not sleep for a while, and that's all right. You can sleep later on, but man, you don't want to miss those first few. It's amazing, and your wife's gonna need your help because she's been through a lot. She produced a human. What? That's amazing. Someone that did that, had a baby in 9, that's just a miracle in itself right there. And be there. Don't be the old school dad where you're in there smoking a cigar and they're giving birth to baby. That's old school. New school, we're involved dads. That's how we're doing things these days. So I love that your message is that's what you appreciate. Be involved, it's for you too. You don't want to be that detached dad later on. Don't be that person. So you've done such amazing work. What do you want your legacy to be with all the blogs and the podcasts and all the resources and Facebook groups? What do you want your legacy to be for helping dads?
I hope that in the work that I've done, that people are learning from it, that they're taking information from it, that they are able to be better fathers in the end because of the work that we're doing as an organization. Um, I don't know how long I'll do it. You know, I mean, I feel like I still get much out of this. I take things out of this, and I feel passionate about what I'm being able to give back to others and help others in many different ways. I love seeing the conversations that are happening in our Facebook communities, our dads with daughters and dads with sons communities. I love it when I get emails from people that are listening to the show that allow me to understand that someone has been able to take what they learned and put it into action. So I think it's the small wins and it's the small things, but it's having a father that may have felt disconnected to be able to feel more connected, be able to find connection and community within the communities that we've developed. You know, all of those things are things that I hope that in the future that outlive me and be able to allow for people to learn and grow from.
That's great. Just like you said, if you learn something, you need to pass it on. I think you've done an awesome job of that. That not just hoarding this information for you, but spreading out freely throughout the world and just making the world a better place. That's a great job on that. So, is there anything you're working on now? Any future plans for anything you got coming up?
You know, I right now we are working on Fathering Together just had the City Dads group merge with us in the fall. And City Dads is a group, a national group that is all about creating fatherhood communities in specific cities. And if you go to fatheringtogether.org, you'll see not only an announcement about this, but you'll also see a link over to the City Dads group and be able to see all the different cities around the United States where we have communities. We have them in many states throughout the entire nation. So looking at those and connecting to those, especially if you have a young child, these are dads that are getting together. There are opportunities for play groups. There's just meetups in regards to, like I said earlier, you go out to a restaurant and you grab some food, grab a drink, be able to just kind of meet up with other dads or go out to see a movie. You know, it's an opportunity to connect with other people that have a similar background or have similar experiences. So that's one big thing. Another big thing that we're working on right now and Fathering Together is we're starting a number of new school-based groups where we are working to be able to bring fathers together in school-based communities. We have a curriculum that we follow that we're trying to help dads to be able to engage dads in many different ways, not only in their own schools, but also engage them in their homes and to be supports within the homes. And we've got a couple of chapters that are doing that right now. So we're hopeful to be able to engage and expand that as well. I love podcasting. I have, like I said, the Dads with Daughters podcast that we continue to uh, have episodes every week where we're telling the stories of fathers of daughters. There is a possible change in the future where we may rebrand that as Fathering Together, but still have the Dads with Daughters podcast as a part of it, but maybe do some expansion there to offer more content out there for dads of sons and on, right? So there's lots of opportunities out there. So, but we're just continuing to try to build community, connect fathers together, and be able to aid them in their own journeys as dads.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a great idea with the city dads connect. We were just talking about how it can be kind of tough to make that connection. So that's got a ready built thing. You can go and check it out. And that's fatheringtogether.org. Go check that out. It's kind of the hub for a lot of these things. Dad of Divas, the blog, I'll link that in show notes, and Dad of Daughters podcast and all the good things that Chris is working out on the world. So appreciate all the resource and all the information you're putting out in the world. This is a team effort out here, and I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you having me here today. Feel free, like Joe just said, come on over to fatheringtogether.org. You can go over to my blog if you want, dadofdivas.com. You know, both of those are places you can find me. I'm on pretty much every social media place as Dad of Divas. So you can find me in all of those as well, and be happy to connect with any dad out there.
That's it. Hey, if you're listening right now, please share this episode with somebody. Somebody needs to hear Chris's message about how to raise good, strong, willful daughters out there changing the world. How you can do that? Share the resources of fathertogether.org. I'll link all that in show notes. If you're like me, you don't spell that great, but you can click on a link like a champ. So we will do that. But just spread the word, spread the positivity about, hey, we need more strong dads in the world. And Chris is out there spreading that, how to do that, because it doesn't come with the instruction manual, but he's got some great resources that can help you along the way. Thanks again for what you're doing, Chris. We'll tune in to see you guys next week on the Relentless Positivity Podcast.